When you think about why are you not taking those next steps, why are you stuck, you have to look at what's preventing you from moving forward. Whether that's the fear that's preventing you, whether it's the fear of judgment that's preventing you. I think you really have to understand what it is that's preventing you and find the courage to take that first step. Build the stronger habit that you build. Oh my God. Find your words, Safer.
Okay, Safer, you just caught a little bit of Lewis.
It's contagious.
Sorry.
Welcome back to Unapologetic Rabble-Rousers. I'm DocShellie.
And I'm Carla Lewis. And we are carrying on with things about what we wish we knew sooner.
Yes, indeed. So I know from the last time we said we were going to cover 3 things. Nobody's watching as closely as you think they are. Feel the fear and do it anyway, which I have thoughts on. And your value is not up for debate.
Oh, amen to that. All of those.
Amen.
Okay.
So let's start with nobody's watching as closely as you think. Cannot tell you how many times I've had my own thoughts around this, but then also how many clients, friends, even perfect strangers think that they're being judged all the time by other people.
Really?
Yeah. I don't want to go to the gym because I gained too much weight. People are going to think I'm too fat to be at the gym.
Oh, geez. Okay.
I probably shouldn't go to the beach because, that 10 extra pounds I gained at Christmas time, ugh. People are just going to judge me.
You know what? And
I probably shouldn't stand up on this stage because I'm going to make a fool of myself and people are going to judge me.
It's like, was it Marianne Williamson that wrote the book that, what you think of me is none of my business?
Oh, yeah, I think she is.
So where does all of that come from? The notion that people would judge, and maybe they do so in silence, and maybe you'll never even know what they had to think or say about it, and yet they might. So what?
Yeah. It's amazing to me how it gets in people's heads. Like they limit themselves because of what other people might think, what other people might do. Growing up in a family that was like, we've got to put on the perfect front. I remember one time my brother and I were outside the front yard fighting about something. We could get pretty loud. And my dad came outside and he was like, take it in the basement. We don't want the neighbors to hear you. And we were both like, who cares? And he was horrified. Well, the neighbors can't know that you guys aren't the perfect little children behind the white picket fence.
Oh, my gosh. Really? Oh, that is hilarious. But at the same time, that would be not an indication. That would be one of the examples of how we may grow up and have this as kind of a rule.
Yeah, he would literally close the windows. If my brother and I were fighting and we were too loud, he'd close the windows because he didn't want the neighbors to hear us. Appearance is everything,
Yeah, okay. Excuse me. And that translates well into adulthood, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you think about the different, as we work through our growth stages, what's being banged into our heads and our hearts, and this is what's right and this is what's wrong from authority figures when we're young, and establishing the basis of those things. Then as we experiment with them in our preteen period where, it's a little bit about rebellion, just kind of testing those boundaries, and then you get into the teen period where it's about, fitting in and being able to be a part of the cool crowd or whatever. It's probably not everybody's ideas. It wasn't mine. I wasn't one of the cool ones, so I didn't bother. But how that translates into every phase of your life.
Yeah.
And so what is so important about the fact that others might judge me? And I do that. I make those kinds of judgments on my own side of things. I think about, oh, God, should I really do that? What happens if somebody doesn't like it?
It's so funny because I just did this the other day, which I don't think I do it very often because I just really don't care what other people think. But at the end of the day, somewhere deep in the recesses of my brain, apparently I do care. But I've been working on a 7-day email course that I'm going to be offering, and I have a 30-page workbook for it. And I banged it all out in one day. I've been thinking about it for months, and I sat down and I just did the whole thing, and I'm like, this is really good. And then I was like, maybe it sucks. So I sent it to a friend of mine. I was like, hey, if you have time, could you just kind of give this a once over and, see if there's any typos that I missed, because I did it in Canva, and Canva's not great at highlighting your typos. And she's like, yeah, I'll take a look. And she called me back later that day, and she was like, this is amazing. You're so good at this. You're so motivating. And I was like, really? She was like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
I was like, well, I wasn't sure if it was like who's going to buy it? And she was like, a lot of people are going to buy it. It was kind of funny because it's so not my typical MO. Mm-hmm. It's like, people will buy it or they won't. Who cares? Then if they don't, you move on to the next thing. And if they do, awesome.
Really?
It's just kind of funny to me when I do that, because it's so out of character for me. And so it kind of stops me in it. First of all, sure, somebody could look at my 30-page workbook and think, this sucks. And other people are going to think it's the best thing ever. I know the intention with which I put it out, mm-hmm. and I think it's good quality. So who cares? It's like coaching. I've said this from the very beginning when I started coaching. I'm a great coach. I am not a great coach for everyone. I have fired clients. I have recommended other coaches for people because we're not a good fit. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Who cares?
Yeah, everybody is not your who, and you're not everybody's who.
Exactly.
You are the who for the people who are wired and in tune with your thinking and how you deliver the brilliance that you bring. We aren't here for everybody.
Right.
We're
exactly.
We're bringing our best self forward, and the notion is that the people who can resonate with whatever the idea is at that moment find us.
Right.
And we're both better off for it.
Exactly.
But gosh, if somebody says no, it doesn't mean you're crap.
Right.
You're not good for them. Okay.
Right. And I think you're thinking about so many people let that fear of others judging them paralyze their actions.
I've been there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know exactly about that. You can have all the confidence in the world, but when it's that little something that maybe came from childhood, whatever, daddy issues, whatever it might be, there's that little something that pops up and somehow has such strength. Mm-hmm. It's like a very concentrated something that just doesn't take up much space. But when it's needed in its own mind, when it's needed, it'll pop up and it'll stop you in your tracks. I'm getting much better at that. But I felt it, and I felt it because we've talked about it, that this whole notion of out on my own, mm-hmm. with what I know is a holy mission, who the hell am I to hold back my brilliance from the world?
You're Carla frickin' Lewis.
That's it. I'm living it out loud and proud, right?
That's right.
But there is that. But what if? What if I'm wrong? What if it's not? What if I'm not the right person? What if? Forget it.
And
Just
what if you're right? What
if
you're right?
We had a conversation about that whole thing. Glass half empty, glass half full in the lost episode.
Yes.
It was
the
brilliant.
episode that is in La La Land. Yeah, it's true. Though we've talked about that glass half empty, because I think you asked the question, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yes.
And I thought, I can't ask myself that question because I will go dark fast. Like the world is going to end. That's the worst thing that's going to happen. And I'm not ready for the world to end.
For me, it's, what's the worst thing that could happen? And it's more of a sarcastic kind of a thing. So you talk about catastrophizing, and I'm just kind of like, whatever. But it's interesting because we did have a really fun conversation around glass half empty and glass half full.
Yeah, and I always try to think about what could happen, what are the possibilities, what are the opportunities, and then sometimes it's such a big opportunity that it might be, mm-hmm. Am I ready for that?
Then it comes in from a different direction, doesn't it? Am I ready for that? We stand in judgment, such severe, critical judgment of self. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, we talked about it a few episodes back, about the notion that I have to stop because I have no idea what was going to come next.
Carla just had a little brain poof.
I did. And I'm going to be okay with it.
What a perfect example of nobody's watching as closely as you think.
Yeah. Yes. And certainly did set the stage for imperfection is better than, imperfection and progress is better than perfect and never getting it done, because we had stuff falling down behind us. It was
random noises. Yeah.
Random noises.
But I think if you think about this notion that nobody's watching as closely as you think, we can't let that get in the way of our personal growth, our careers, risks that we might be willing to take. People are going to judge us whether we do or whether we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that are judging are not your people. They don't matter.
It's so true. And I want to bring in a question. Your statement was, we cannot let this kind of doubt or judgment get in our way. What can we do to recognize? How might we recognize that while we don't think we are, but maybe, how do we recognize that we're letting that kind of stuff get in the way?
I think, I'm going to go back to journaling.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I think that when you think about why are you not taking those next steps, why are you stuck, you have to look at what's preventing you from moving forward. Whether that's the fear that's preventing you, whether it's the fear of judgment that's preventing you. I think you really have to understand what it is that's preventing you and find the courage to take that first step.
I wonder if some of it might not also include, as soon as I find myself blaming my circumstances for the fact that I'm not making progress, or I'm not achieving what I set out to achieve, that's an invitation to say, okay, well, who's in charge of the circumstances? What circumstances are really in my way? Mm-hmm. And again, it does get back to that reflection, that mind work, that journaling, or whatever form of self-reflection serves you to say, okay, you know what? Wait a minute. All right, it's not outside of me. That's not what's in the way.
Right. And I think, too, kind of bouncing off that a little bit, is this notion that it's not enough. Like that small step I could take tomorrow, it's not enough. And we need to recognize that small steps can add up to huge results, to big transformations. But we so often diminish or excuse or just think that it's not enough. And think about a baby. A baby does not all of a sudden start walking. A baby has to learn how to crawl, and then they have to learn how to pull themselves up, and then they wobble around a little bit, and they have to learn how to balance, and then they take a step and they fall down, and then they get up, and they wobble around again, and they might take 2 steps and they fall down. It is several months of a process for them to learn how to walk, a basic function of life. And we're over here going, oh, if I work out 10 minutes a day, it's not enough. It's never going to get me to my goal. If I only spend 10 minutes a day on my social media, it's not enough. It's not going to get me to my 10,000 followers.
Yeah.
Small steps can equal big results. So we can't dismiss those small things that we think aren't enough, because they are.
Small hinges open big doors. Yes. It's about, and I think it's interesting you brought up the baby example, because I think there's probably a bit of judgment that comes along as we consider that is so very true. I mean, nobody's going to be able to argue the fact that it takes that time to learn to walk or to crawl and then to walk, to roll over.
Roll over, yeah.
Right? And then we're saying, okay, I'm an adult. what's my version of learning how to roll over, and then to crawl, and then to stand, and then to walk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting way to consider that, okay, 10 minutes a day actually can make a difference. It, the child tries 10 times to roll over, gives up. Next day tries 10 times, and there's a little bit more, and there's enthusiasm that comes from it because it does add up.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that might get in the way, too, is, for me, this has happened, like playing, I used to play tennis pretty competitively, and then I had an injury, and I had to stop playing, and then I thought, well, I want to start playing again. I think the injuries can handle it. So I started playing again. Because of the injury, I couldn't play at the competitive level I was at. It just pissed me off. And I think about, I play the piano. I studied piano for 18 years. I can't sit down and play the piano like I did 20 years ago. I'm plunking it out. Mm-hmm. And I used to be able to play beautifully. Mm-hmm. I think about going back to the gym. Something I've been putting off for a while because I know I won't be able to go in there and leg lift 280 pounds. I probably have to start at 20 pounds, maybe 50. So it's also that I know I was up here at this very high level of being able to execute, and now I kind of have to start over.
There's a recalibration, and we're not really well practiced.
Yeah.
At that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a 30-year-old living somewhere in my 70-year-old body. There are things that I will keep trying to do that are just, okay, great that I used to be able to do them. Well, what's so bad about the fact that my capacity, whether because I let it disappear or it just doesn't matter where it went, it isn't here.
Right.
And if I want to get it back, it's not going to be through wishing. It's going to be through hard work. And it might even be recognizing that, well, okay, let's not live in the past lane. Let's live in today's lane.
The fast lane.
Yeah. Kind of medium speed. It's but yeah, it's that recalibration. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I was able to do it before. I didn't get it overnight then. I'm not going to get it overnight now.
Yeah. I think that kind of leads us into the next thing was feel the fear and do it anyway, right? So it's kind of leaning into that. And I cringe when I hear a parent say to a child, fear it and do it anyway. Partially because I feel like you're dismissing what is it that you're afraid of? What is the fear? Because I think it's important that you know what the fear is before you do it anyway. I like the concept of feel the fear and do it anyway. But if the fear is legit real, like I'm obsessed with these kids that are snowboarders on Instagram. I can doom scroll on Instagram with these families. And one of them, when the kid says, I'm scared, the dad always is like, what are you scared about? Let's talk about it. And the other one, that both parents are like, just do it anyway. And I'm like, shouldn't you check in on the fear first before you just dismiss it and do it anyway? Especially with snowboarding. like you're talking about sending your 6-year-old over a jump. Maybe they're afraid they're going to break their legs and you can talk about it for a moment and then encourage them to do it anyway. But if there's a real fear, I think it's important to check in on it.
Well, I would agree with that, absolutely. And as a skill, as a life skill, to be able to learn that from childhood on, that there are things that are going to appear to be scary. So let's take a look at what it is that appears to be scary and understand it.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a long and involved conversation. Say, what's the scariest thing? What is it? Let's talk about that. And it might end up being something like, well, they're going to see that I'm not perfect or whatever it might be, this whole image thing. But being, as a parent, which I've never been, as I would think, being able to help a young person understand that it's not something to be dismissed. It's not something that should freeze you,
Right.
in your pursuit of some new something. So acknowledge it. It's okay to feel it. Let's acknowledge it. You need to think it through. What is it that's bothering you? I don't know how to do X. Okay, well, let's make sure you're comfortable doing that so that you won't have to worry about that next time.
Right.
Whatever. I don't know why, but I have to share this. I saw one of those Facebook things, reels or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a family, and they were sledding, but they had this big rubber tire tube, and there was like a cloth insert so that the kid could sit on it, and it had little handles on it that they could hold on to. And the kid wanted to go face first, hanging over the edge, with his face head downhill. Dad said, no, put your bottom in that, this is a test run. So, okay, everybody, we're going to go. And so he pushes it. So this video is from the top of the hill. Pushes the kid, and the kid's going, it was woo, and then kept going. And then it started taking a turn, and he disappeared behind a grove of trees. And the dad saying, shit, where does that go? The kid just disappeared. And I was thinking, oh, okay. But I don't know why I had to share that, but it was just the first thing that came to mind when you were talking about the snowboarding families. But being able to say, okay, this kid was not afraid. He wasn't. And then the dad got afraid after he saw his kid take this turn, and he had no idea where he was going to end up. Where does that go?
That's funny. Yeah, I was a pretty adventurous youngster myself, and so shocking, I know. But all those personality tests, it's like adventurer was very high on my on my outcome. But yeah, pretty fearless in doing some stupid things. I'm just glad that all the social media wasn't around when I was growing up.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine?
Yeah. But I heard a great quote that went something like, "Courage isn't the absence of fear; it's action despite it."
Okay.
Which I think it kind of goes in the feel the fear and do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But just check in. You got to have the courage to face it, and face it in a way that is going to honor what you want and the outcomes you want.
Yeah.
Like, don't just do it anyway.
I think being able to understand it as a philosophy, feel the fear and do it anyway, being mindful of what's really at the core of the fear.
Exactly.
It's just that one little, and it's not much of a pause. It could be like 2 nanoseconds, and being able to say, okay, I'm afraid of what? I don't know. Well, then, let's go do it. But just like you said, honoring the fact that there is that, and especially in a child, to be able to say, okay, let's just make sure that, what it is that's really got you concerned right now. Because as a parent, you don't want to send them into harm's way if they really are afraid of being able to execute. I'm still on the hill now with the snowboards and all that. Yeah.
When I think, as you were talking, something popped in my head, and I have a friend who had a really kind of a fearful sense of going to work one day. And this is a person who never took time off. We've kind of lost track of each other. But anyway, she had a real, just this real, guttural, I can't go to work today, something bad is going to happen, fear. And she tried to rationalize herself out of it, and she didn't end up going to work that day. And there was a catastrophic situation that had happened in her office that day. And I don't know that she would be here today to talk about that had she felt that fear and gone to work anyway. But it was a big deal for her to process through not going to work, because that's just not who she was. And it's kind of interesting when you really think about those pivotal moments in your life where your gut instinct, which could be fear, is saying, go left, not right.
There's so many opportunities to ignore those gut checks. It's like, boy, there is no real formula for knowing when that check is against something that we're contriving because of something else, or it's truly that intuition that says, no, you must stop.
Yeah.
I saved my mom from getting decapitated with that same kind of don't try to process it, just do something, because it was a giant snowfall back when we had giant snowfalls around here. And we had an aluminum screen porch that was built on the back of the house. Mm-hmm. And there's like 12 feet of snow. It was just an awful amount of snow. And I heard some noises coming from the porch. And I was looking out. I happened to have a window that looked out into that. And Mom went down, opened the back door to kind of get a better look at what was going on with the porch. And I just knew something was about to happen, and I shouted, "Get back!" And as she did, the whole roof just came. It would have taken her head off.
Oh,
just
geez.
came crashing down, like not even a half second after I shouted, and she responded, which was really good. I mean, oh my gosh.
Wow. Oh
my gosh. But you think about, for your friend who honored that gut, that intuition that said, no, not today.
Yeah.
And especially as wildly different as that feeling would have been for her, as one who doesn't get sick, there's no reason to not go to work.
Right.
It's part of who I am and how I am, and then to get that strong of an indication and then honor it. Mm-hmm. Wow. So, where do we go with things we wish we knew sooner?
We had one more. Your value is not up for debate.
Amen. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that your self-worth doesn't come from any sort of external validation. It doesn't come from other people. It is an inside job, and it is our responsibility to have our own self-worth. We can't put it in somebody else's hands.
When that happens, what's really going on?
When what happens?
When I put my self-worth, my sense of my worth, in the hands of others to determine. Why am I doing that? Why would I do that?
Why would you do that? A lot of people do.
Okay, but what is it? Is it because that we don't have enough awareness of ourselves? We haven't spent the time to do it. That we really have absolutely no gauge of what it is.
I think a lot of things can come into play there. I think people that have been taken advantage of, people that don't have self-respect, people that maybe grew up in homes that didn't teach these kinds of things, where they don't know how to have their own value and their own self-worth.
How would we define that? How, if we were talking to somebody who was struggling with self-worth, what are they struggling with? What are the components, the characteristics, the elements of one's?
I think it's going to be different for everyone. I think it was in one of our episodes. It might have been in one of our pre-conversations. You're like, who am I to breathe air right now?
Okay.
Right? And so I know you were joking about it, but at the same time, there's some underlying thought that is like, I don't feel so self-worthy right now. And we all probably have those moments where we're like, that was probably not the brightest thing I've ever done. But it also can't shake your inherent self-worth. And I think people who don't have a lot of self-awareness, I think people who are victims of gaslighting, we've talked about gaslighting, those things can shake your self-worth when you let them, when you don't have the strength of mind to say, no, I'm not going to fall trap to that.
I'm thinking there's also an element of leveraging those external inputs, leveraging those inputs from others to fill the cavity that we haven't stuffed with our own ideas about what makes me worthy. So if I'm really not sure how to judge it myself, I can only use other people's judgment to be able to establish that. And so clearly I'm going to put that value judgment in the hands of others and hope that I interpret the signals correctly, that yes, I'm a good person. They said so. They said so. They said so. Yes, I'm a funny person.
But that one person over there said I wasn't a good person, and I'm going to believe that voice.
Isn't that the case? Right? Right? It's that turd in the punch bowl. That you could have an entire room full of really happy, peppy people, and then there's that one that comes in, just exuding this negative energy. It's like, oh, God. The air goes out of the room, but the air can go out of your own balloon.
Mm-hmm.
And we let that one negative thing wipe out 100 positive things.
Overshadow all the good, yeah. And you think about all those keyboard warriors on social media that have no problem coming in and telling you that you suck.
And it's interesting because those of us who are blessed with opportunities to speak up and speak out, and as we are doing, giving voice to things that need it, there are those who just need to rail against simply because that makes them stand out. Mm-hmm. So if I can't stand out as an individual because my self-worth in and of itself is sucky, or I've not done anything to cultivate it, but I can stand out as a, keyboard warrior? I can stand out as somebody who will, I will just knock you down. I will just tell you how poopy you are. Mm-hmm. And get some kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure that they do get delight out of it.
I think they do. I think they love the reactions they get.
Yeah.
I used to work, many years ago, I worked with somebody who was just constantly chattering about people and to people and kind of trying to beat people down. And he got the biggest delight out of the reactions that he would get from people. So I never gave him a reaction. I was like, okay, well, thanks. Thanks for sharing. But other people were like, oh, my God. They would just give him the reaction, and he would just sit there and just grin from ear to ear because he got the reaction he was looking for. Yeah, he didn't mean half the stuff he said. He just wanted the reaction.
We did talk about that a bit in one of our episodes. Wow. So, self-worth and not depending on others to be able to give it to you. Mm-hmm. It's not something that can be awarded you.
It's an inside job.
What are the things that we could do, Michelle, about auditing? And audit is such a
You're so
word.
Technical.
I don't know. Right now, I guess I am.
I go back to journaling.
Okay.
Like, what are the things that you value about yourself? What are the things that you like about yourself? What are your core values, and how do they show up in your life? What are the positive things other people say about you? And I know we're not necessarily looking for that external validation, but it can help to say, oh, these people think I'm smart. And then you can look internally and say, you know what, they're right. I am smart. Check. And so you can do that. But journaling, again, is a powerful, powerful tool that everyone has at the ends of their fingertips to either write or type, or even leave yourself a voice note on those kinds of things and how your self-worth shows up. And I think it's important to understand what are some of the, I hate the word triggers, but what are some of the triggers or the things that happen that cause you to question your self-worth? Are there people? Are there relationships? Are there situations that make you question the value that you have? It's not really up for debate because it's really in your hands. But being aware of those situations is really helpful, and then you can prepare your script in your head for combating those situations or those people's thoughts.
I think the notion of those affirming ideas, saying, no, what is the truth? Not just what do I feel. What is the truth of it all? Mm-hmm. And what stands in the way of me living in that truth. And I love that idea, and I'm good with the word triggers, because the thing that one person that comes in and says something negative, or that so many different scenarios that we've covered in our talks together, that they just put you in this place. They put your head or your heart or your physical being responding to things excitedly, or the fight or flight thing. Mm-hmm. Being able to understand that if there are things that are triggering you to the negative, to the doubt, explore how true is the story that you start telling yourself based on what just triggered you to start feeling that way. Because that's one of the things that has been consistent in your reflections for us on what can we be doing to be living in the truest form of ourself, in our thought, word, and deed. And it's one of the things is to check the stories that we're telling ourselves.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you how many times in a day I find myself saying, okay, what's that story all about? Mm-hmm. And it really is a fun and effective way of saying, you got this chatter going on. You may as well check it to make sure that whatever story it's weaving, or whatever's getting triggered, whatever story is getting triggered, mm-hmm. especially on the negative side. For me right now, I am a glass half full kind of gal. And through this recovery, I am, from the hacking incident that we talked about in the last episode or two, I'm critical, I'm technical, I'm living rather guarded and a little bit clenched, but I am in a position of responding, mm-hmm. as opposed to what I was first in, which was reacting. Mm-hmm. And I had to do a big check on a story that was running through my gut. It just consumed me, about being an idiot. And how could this have happened to me? I just, it was awful. Mm-hmm. And it lasted about 12 or 15 minutes. And I had to say, stop. This is not serving. Go back to my word of the year, which is focus. And that's what's been going on. So checking the story that pops up when you get triggered, positively or not so positively.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, like you said, you were stuck in it for 12 or 15 minutes. People get stuck in the story for years, decades.
Yeah.
So it's really important. Let me rephrase that. The better you build the stronger habit that you build. Oh my God. Find your words, Seyfarth.
Okay, Seyfarth, you just caught a little bit of Lewis.
It's contagious.
Sorry.
I think if you are able to learn how to build the habit of talking back to your brain, because we have two brains. I've talked about it before. We have the habit brain and we have the CEO brain. If you get really good at practicing talking back to your brain and saying, no, we're not doing this right now. We're not thinking those thoughts. I knew this was coming. I anticipated this thought, but here's a new thought that we're going to test out today. When you can get really good at doing that, you can spot those stories and you can stop them in their tracks like you did in 12 or 15 minutes versus letting it go on for days, weeks, months, years. Mm-hmm. So practice talking back to your brain on even the little things, like something as innocuous as, it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm going to have a piece of chocolate. Not that I have experience with that. And it's like, why do you need chocolate right now? Well, because I always have a piece of chocolate at 10 o'clock at night. Okay, but maybe we don't do that today. And then my brain throws a little hissy fit. And then I'm like, we're going to do something different. Mm-hmm. But we're going to survive. We're going to be okay. Yeah. But it's like you almost have to prove to the other side of your brain that we can do things differently. Yeah. We can think different stories. We can have different thoughts. And it's going to be okay.
That habit brain
is strong.
incredible strength.
Strong.
I appreciated when you brought that concept out recently, and the notion that to be able to overpower the habit brain takes some self-love.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a feeling of self-worth.
Absolutely.
It's understanding what's important and what matters, not just what I want to do, but what's important and what matters. And so reflection, all of that. I really appreciate that notion of the CEO brain and the habit brain.
Yeah.
And the stories. Being able to say, wait a minute.
Yeah. Hold up here.
and very many variations. Now, that story is not serving me right now. That story is not working.
Mine is, that's some bullshit thinking.
So let's cut out the bullshit thinking.
Exactly.
What a great way to end this. Thank you.
My last thought that's going through my head is, our lives don't get better by chance. They get better by change. And change can happen in those small, little steps that we often discount. So stop discounting them. Take the small steps. Take the first step. Remember that the small steps are indeed enough. With that, I'm DocShellie. We'll see you next time.
And I'm Carla Lewis. Take care.
Our lives don't get better by chance. They get better by change. And change can happen in those small, little steps that we often discount. So stop discounting them. Take the small steps. Take the first step. Remember that the small steps are indeed enough.